Great. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining. My name is Paveen. I work at the University of Sheffield and Doncaster and Bassetlaw Teaching Hospitals as Professor of Nursing and Gender-Based Violence. This is a series which we run from University of Sheffield and Doncaster and Bassetlaw Teaching Hospitals, and in association with my colleague Sarah Gardner from who's based at the library at DBTH, and Sarah will tell you a little bit more about herself. So what we aim to do through this series is that my job at DBTH is about developing research capacity among well, it started off with developing research capacity among nurses, midwives, and AHPs. So we started this workshop series as part of that. And what we aim to do is talk in simple language a little bit about various different issues that affect people getting into research or understanding publication process and getting kind of, a little bit comfortable with any of those sorts of things. You may not be writing anything for now, or you may be somebody who is really into writing. So as I was asking Andy, it's always useful to talk to others and to kind of, listen to what has helped and what usually is useful. So how we go through these talks is very simple. We talk about simple principles, but please, just to give you an overview, because we don't know if there are people who are, who have never done anything like that, and you never want to kind of affect their confidence in any ways. So we started off with that aspect, but we now, this thing is attended by not only colleagues from DBTH, which includes advanced care practitioners, nurses, midwives, AHPs, doctors, anyone who is interested in writing, because writing doesn't change with regards to your profession. You still have to, the principle and everything remains the same. And I think it allows people to also see who is doing what. So that's the purpose of it. So I'll ask Sarah to introduce herself and tell her a little bit about her, and then we can just take it on from there. And Sarah, please, if you could say something like, we've been doing it for past year as well, and if you wanted to say anything around the new series that we're starting today. Thank you.
Thanks, Paveen. I'm Sarah Gardner. I'm the Clinical Evidence Specialist for Doncaster and Bassetlaw Trust, and I work in the library service. So our role is multifaceted, as all library services are, but we particularly enjoy and have an interest in supporting research at every level within the trust. So Paveen and I cooked up this series of webinars last year. We've run them once all the way through, and we did a huge evaluation on kind of individual bits of feedback that came out of each session, and also kind of some more themes that came out. And so this program of webinars has built on what was good about last year's and things that people wanted to see in addition. So we're starting the program with this one. Now, I like to collect a little bit of data as we go along, as all good librarians do. So I'm sticking an Answer Garden link into chat, and this is to get a feel for the job roles that you have. Now, we're not after you being like super creative. If someone's put something in there quite similar to you, then that's good. So at the moment it's empty, so fill it with your job roles. That would be lovely, and we'll build on that each webinar, and by the end of it we will get a collection of the kind of the people and the professions that we've reached. I'm going to be peppering the chat with other links because we have a supporting research webpage as part of our library suite of web pages, and there will be some useful things in there for you. And I'll also give a little plug. The next month's session in this program is rather boldly called Shut Up and Write. And it is a structured session to allow you time to consider your writing aims and actually get pen to paper. So if that sounds useful, it's time that you can diarise to actually concentrate on writing. So we'll see how that one goes. So I'll hand back over to Paveen, who has got all the content and the knowledge, and I will assist as I can through the session.
Well, you're not assisting, you are a very much equal and sometimes more than equal partner. So please do chip in if there's anything that needs to be done. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we have got a little bit of time, and I think the group is not very big. So it will be useful if you're okay to just tell us a little bit about yourself, and especially what would you expect? What is your expectations from this session? What is it that you would like to learn? This will then help me make sure that relevant points are discussed where it's needed. So I hope that is okay. So I'm just going to go through my list. So the first one is Abdurrahman Molim Ibrahim.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Abdurrahman. I am currently in India studying Master of Public Health. So I'm expecting here to learn from like how to tell histories to like either decision makers or to the community or any parts of people that you are engaging with.
Okay, great. Thank you. Andy?
Hello. Yeah, so I'm just, as I said earlier, Praveen, just here looking to fill any little gaps, any little tips that, because I've written quite a lot, as you'll probably know, and I'm certainly more comfortable writing blog articles and lay articles than I am academic articles. But I've written a book and a few papers. But yeah, just kind of listening in and listening for any kind of tips, things that tools that I might not know of.
Thank you. Caroline?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm Caroline, I'm theatre manager at Doncaster. So I work out of main theatres and generally, but I do operational flow across Bassett Law and Montague as well. So I started my master's in healthcare leadership at Sheffield in January and did one module. I hadn't studied for a while, so I found it fairly challenging on top of working full time. So I thought this would benefit me well when I start my next modules in September.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm Clinical Coding Data Quality Systems Manager. I'm quite, newish to this role. It's like a development role, and part of my role is going to be writing reports from data found from different codes that are used for specialties. So it'll be reports that I'll need to feed back to managers and other areas at Doncaster. With the findings, so I'll need to write quite in-depth reports and use Excel. So it's just to really gain some better knowledge and understanding how to sort of make that a bit more professional and get to address the right point that I need to make.
Great, thank you. Maudryn?
Hi, I'm Maudryn Burton. I'm a research nurse manager. I'm interested in, I have co-written a few papers. However, I would like to be the main author on a paper, and I'm interested in case study. So I'm looking how can I sort of develop my confidence in writing more case studies and being first author. Thanks.
Thank you, Maudryn. Ayaz, Mohammed Ayaz?
Hi, Dr. Praveen. I hope you will be fine. Thank you so much for having this session. My purpose is to learn how to write, articles and blogs. Especially, I have done master's in nursing from the University of Lahore, and I want to, pursue in PhD. So how to write a proposal for the PhD and proceed in that. So that's my aim.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. And that's really useful because that allows me to see that people are coming from various different purposes. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of an overview and talk about things. And then if you have questions, you can keep writing your questions, and we could ask, we could have a little bit of a discussion, and we could talk through the questions that people have. Is that okay? So who are you writing it for? So usually, whatever you write, be it's a blog, people write for various different reasons. That could be that you are writing it for, if you're an academic, so you want to share your work across to other colleagues, and you want to share what's new development you have done or your colleagues have done, that's you want to share with the academic and scientific community. You may want to give that information to lay audience, to general public, to tell them about what you have done. You may want to say it simply to kind of, get attention to the article that you may have written, or talk about various different things. Like many of you have said here, you may want to write a proposal, and which means that it's going to go to your potential supervisors or PhD supervisors, and other people who are looking at the application in different universities. And there could be various different reasons. You may be working in NHS or any similar organizations, and where you are using the data and you're trying to use that data to write a report so that other people who are not familiar or are familiar with your field, they can understand the concept, and they can have the better knowledge about what you're writing. So writing, there are various ways you can pick your audience. It depends on why you are writing, like who is it you're writing for. It could be based on their profession, or it could be based on their interest. When we say based on their profession, so for example, if I am a nurse and if I'm writing something about nursing, then I know that, okay, this is my audience, and my language that I use or write would probably be slightly different, because the terminologies used in any particular profession or in any particular aspects are quite different. So I'm not sure if you have picked up, if you pick up a newspaper, for example, Daily Mail or Sun or anything else like that, you would see that the language used even in those newspapers which are written for general public is also different, because the audience that they want to cater to is very different. Similarly, if I am a nurse, but I want to write something which is not necessarily is about or is aimed at nurses or healthcare professionals, but is aimed at policymakers or is aimed at general public. So then the use of language which I have, or what I say and how I say it in the thing, could be very different. So therefore, it is always very, very important that you need to think through as to who your audience are. And there are these ways of generally picking it, that, if you are writing it for generic audience, you can pick it up from by their profession or looking at their interest, or you can think of a particular age group. And that's the way it helps you narrow your audience and helps you understand who this person is, who I'm writing for, and what is it that they're going to look for. Similarly, if you're writing for publication, submitting it to a journal, you're basically writing for editors, reviewers, and then finally your audience. So the language and how you would do things would be completely different. Writing needs to have a purpose. You need to know what is it that you're writing it for. Is it that because you want to provide information to other people and share something with them? Is it educational? Is it entertaining? Is it motivational? So what is it? What is the message, and why do you want to do it? It is something that you need to think through, and that then helps you with how you write, what sort of language you use, what sort of messages you use, and what sort of techniques you're going to use to provide examples. So for instance, you can have small little kind of, exam quotes from different people, or you can have something like, examples of case studies and things like that. But that all is going to depend on who are you writing it for. So if you're writing it for children and you're trying to explain to them, let's say, brushing techniques, so you may want to add that, okay, I'm going to have some pictures here, so it's just easier for people to understand how to do it. And the way you do it would be very different than how if you were going to write it for adults. So these are few things that you need to think through before, at the time when you're designing it. Most of these activities are usually mental activities. But if you are new to it, so for example, a couple of colleagues have mentioned here that, you know, they're starting to write for master's level, or they're starting to write other things. What I always suggest to my students is learn few techniques like mind mapping or spider techniques and stuff like that, which will help you think through as to which message you want to give, what audience you want to, you're writing it for, and how much you want to write it, how bigger or smaller you want this to write for. Another easier way of doing this is make an outline. So making an outline helps you think through the message that you want to come up to bring up to other people. And then within that message, what other messages you want to give. So I usually use a technique where you have got, you know, the message that you want to give and divide that message into 3 aspects and talk about one aspect or 1 to 2 aspects for each of the aspects that you have decided earlier on. So you may change the whole thing when you start writing, but at least if you've thought about the structure into it, then it helps you write better. So for instance, if I was going to talk about gender-based violence and I'm writing it for usual audience, general public, which includes anyone, which includes people who are experiencing abuse, which may also includes people who are perpetrating abuse, and which also includes healthcare professionals. So what my purpose is that I want to provide an overview of the topic, and I want people to understand what challenges women or those experiencing abuse go through and why they do not speak. So when I have clarified that in my head that these are my audience, so this will help me kind of think through what messages I'm giving. And I've already told you that I want to talk to them about what is it, why people don't speak, and, you know, how to access help. So once I've identified these 3 aspects, then it will also help me to kind of, you know, think through what specific aspects I'm going to say within these. So for instance, why people don't, or why women or men experiencing abuse do not disclose. So you see, I said earlier on that I'm writing for general public, which means there could be women experiencing abuse and there could be men experiencing abuse. So you can see that already I'm not using the terminology that, you know, I'm only talking about women. Okay, I can talk about women, but then I'm clearly thinking that if it's for everybody, so even if when I'm going to say that women experience abuse more than men, I will specifically provide evidence to that effect, or I will specifically say that in my writing that this is what happens, and in this paper we are referring to this, and that's what I'm going to do. So thinking through helps you, what is it that you're going to do? There are different type of articles or different type of outputs that you want to write for. So for example, I've just given few things here. So an example could be pilot study, case study, research article, literature review, systematic reviews, letters to editors. Most of these are coming from writing for publication as in sort of the formal publication route as journals, because these are the terminologies that you use there. And the purpose of writing and reporting in each of this is very different. So pilot studies, usually when you have used a technique, maybe a research kind of, you know, data collection, data analysis technique, or you've piloted the whole the whole proposal as to feasibility of the study to try and see if that's going to run better or not. It may be a questionnaire that you wanted to see if it's working or not. And what you want to do here is report what you have learned. And the idea here is to provide what worked, what didn't work, and what are the suggestions for the next stage, so that the actual experiment, when it's done, is improved and has learned from the aspects of pilot studies. And so which then means that it's usually written for people who are doing that kind of work, and therefore the kind of details that you're going to add in here is more about methods and how you've done various different things. What did you do to change that, or what could somebody do to change different aspects? The term case study is, I find it very useful and very confusing at the same time. It means very different things to various different disciplines. Somebody here used a word case study earlier on that was it you? Who was it? Let me see. Modrian. You mentioned case study, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes.
What kind of case study? Will you give me a little bit more detail as to what do you mean by case study when you say that?
So like patient's experience, I wrote my master's on advanced communication. And what I noticed was that there was a difference with nurses and clinical, not clinical, sort of like academic researchers and how they approach patients. And nurses were more able to get patients to say yes to research than those who were from the academic side. And I wanted to understand why, because both individuals were approaching patients and telling them about the project, but there was something behind the approach in terms of getting to understand the patient themselves before you tell them about the research, and you get a bit more buy-in. So more like using those sort of cases to sort of understand and just using a few examples, like one nurse approach a patient and just write about the story for that, and then one about the academic approaching the patient and writing the story and that, but really going into detail how approaches sort of changes how someone say yes to a research project.
Okay, great, thank you. So you see, the case study, the word case study is used, especially in the medical and health literature, when a new or interesting or useful case is identified, and it usually talks about one particular person and the disease or the symptoms or anything that very unique about them which has been happening, or and people have noticed that they want to share with other colleagues. Very common in medical literature, and usually would be junior doctors or at various stages doctors, and what they do is they identified a case which is very interesting and they wanted to disseminate information. So they explain the case in as much detail as possible. You would see many journals, sometimes even the x-rays, or there is this full description of the symptoms and other aspects which are there, sometimes including x-rays and investigations as well. It could also be about a surgical technique or the medical management of a condition, which they did it slightly differently. So, but it is usually about one particular person when it comes to medical literature. They used to be very, very common and very, very popular. Now, many journals do not accept case studies as a form of publications. And if we look at, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of hierarchy of evidence. So case studies come at the bottom list. And I think that has affected how many people submit case studies and, how these are seen in the medical journals. But still, you would see people writing it. So that's one type of case study. Case study could also be a qualitative sort of method where you may have chosen one organization or one individual or one department or something like that, and you present that as a case and you explain how you're calling it a case study. So it means different thing to different people. Okay, so that's the reason I asked, and that's the reason you also hear when you're using or thinking of writing a case study, you need to think through again, what is the purpose that you're writing it, and who is it that you're writing it for, and can you actually call it a case study, or could it be something else? Because it will change your approach, it will affect the audience that you're getting, it will affect how you title the whole case study thing, or where you publish and everything else. The other thing which thinking about journals is research article. Research article could be qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods depending on what you have done. Aim here usually is that you want to report on a study that you and your colleagues have conducted, and therefore you want to bring this out to other people. And there are structured criteria to write this. So all of these would have even if they have similar headings. So most of them probably you would find that, introduction, methods, results, and discussion kind of headings. But if you read through them, the content and how those headings are utilized are very different. And most journals would provide you with specific guidance in the author's guidelines sections to have a look and make sure that your paper is meeting those guidelines, which has to do anything with even how your title should be, to word count, and what sort of headings or subheadings or aspects you need to have in the study. Literature reviews, systematic reviews, or some sort of narrative reviews, or some kind of literature reviews are also another thing. There are various different types of literature reviews that are available depending on for various different audience and for various different purposes. So again, there are usually specific guidelines as to how these should be written and reported, because what you're reporting here is different than what you were reporting in the research article. And another thing is letters to editors or editorials, where people generally pick up an issue and want to have a discussion or share the information to the editors, to other people about a particular practice, about a particular study that may have been published in the same journal, etc. So again, it depends on what you're what you're doing for. As mentioned it earlier, that when it comes to academic journals, you're writing it for editors first, because they're the first one who are going to have a look at what you're written. And if they are convinced that it's written well, it relates to the aims and scope of the journal that you have submitted to. It gives proper message, then they will pass on to the next stage and maybe are able to identify reviewers who look at things at very differently, because then they're going to look at, is the science used accurate? What you're saying in terms of lessons, is that making sense? Are you critical enough? And various other bits about, like, the level and awareness of the field that you're of practice that you're talking about. And finally is your audience, that B, it's if you're writing for a nursing journal or medical journal or anything else, B, it's any of those people, as to what is it that you want to communicate to them. So the idea always here is that when you write for any kind of any of these types, be it a journal, or you could be writing a blog for conversations, or any particular outlet that you're writing it for, it's always important to have a look at if they have provided you with some sort of guidance as to what they're looking for. Usually aims, objectives, and who their audience is clearly written in there. And that helps you decide, is that the right kind of audience that you're writing it for? Is that the right kind of journal that I'm going to submit to? Is that what is going to be the intended outcome? So it's really important that you have read through aims, objectives, etc. for the journal, for the website, for any of those aspects earlier on. And you have also decided what is the message that you want to give it to people to take it to the next stage. So I'm working with a group of colleagues at the moment, and we are writing a paper, and I've recently said to them that if you want to publish as a working paper, if you eventually would like to publish as a journal article, you really need to think now as to where you're going to send it. So a common mistake which many people make is that they start writing without thinking as to where it is going to go. Where is it that you're going to publish? And that also relates to thinking about your audience and who are you writing it for. Because if you haven't identified a particular outlet or a particular journal where your information is going to go, it's not going to work. So for example, if you're writing a proposal to get admission to a PhD program, you cannot write it as like a journal article, because that's not the purpose of your writing is. That's not what your potential supervisors will be looking for when they're reading your proposal, and you've not done the research yet. So therefore the journal article writing would be very, very different. They're looking for specific aspects, which you need to make sure that it's always there. So looking at the guidance, looking at specific aspect is really important. 90% of the publications which get rejected, DES reject earlier on from journals, including my journals, are just because the people have not written according to the author's guidelines, and they have not followed it, and they have not checked who the journal is for, who the journal is aimed for, and is your article right fit for that particular journal or for that particular source or not. And you waste quite a number of hours after submitting to it, because somebody's going to get the time to go back and read and everything else, and would then tell you that, oh wow, sorry, it's not appropriate for our journal. And it's a waste of time and energy, because you would have spent a lot of time looking at making sure it meets the journal's requirement in terms of formatting and everything else, submitting it and waiting for the feedback, finally to get a rejection. So you're better off spending time and looking at the guidelines for anything that you're writing, and to just take it on from there. So here, I'm going to bring Sarah. She's going to talk a little bit about blogs and specific aspects around that. I am conscious that the content of this particular session is very generic in terms of who are you writing it for, and we'll take questions, we'll discuss it through. It's kept generic because to have that understanding, because I think quite a lot of people struggle with that. If it was about a journal article or things like that, they're a bit more specific, and therefore a bit more easier to take through to next stage. But bear with us, and we can have a discussion about various different aspects around that. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. Now I'm chipping in about blogs, as that's one of the few kind of publishing vehicles that I have something connected to. So this is, as Parveen was saying, this isn't going to be highly specific, and it's also not going to be a particularly techie as well. So if you are thinking about blogging as a means to either kind of communicate your research findings, or to find your writing voice, for example, there's lots of different reasons why you might want to set up a blog, or to contribute to a subject-specific blog in the field that you're interested in. But there are a few sort of key things to bear in mind. I mean, people have used blogging in the past as a kind of cathartic online diary, and there's always the possibility to do the kind of verbal vomit onto a blog, but I really don't think that that's what we're going to discuss today. It's about a sort of targeted method of getting your work and ideas out there, and it follows everything that Parveen said about defining your target audience. Before you're writing a blog post, you really need to know clearly who ideally you are aiming this at. So if you can understand who you want to be reading your blog, it helps you tailor the content to meet their interests, their preferences, that kind of thing. So it depends how you would moderate the vocabulary that you're using, the language that you're choosing for who you want to reach with this particular blog. And that could be in terms of age, it could be profession, it could be, a lot of people may read it when it's out on the web, but who are you actually aiming it at? And you would consider the terminology that you would use and the style that you would use to meet that particular market. A captivating headline, it sounds easy, doesn't it? But really, for a blog entry to attract some attention, to get some traction, to look good when you tweet about it, you really need a compelling kind of headline. You can grab the reader's attention with that, and ideally something that's sort of concise, maybe intriguing. If the title of your blog page sort of highlights the value or the benefit that the reader's going to get from reading that, that's particularly good. It's worth spending a bit of time crafting your attention-grabbing headline that's going to pique people's curiosity and entice readers to sort of dive into your content. The content itself, it's really helpful if you're writing on a blog to make the blog post itself logical and easy to sort of follow a structure. So use subheadings, use bullet points, make it a numbered list always goes well. 12 reasons to do something or other. Something that will grab attention and break up the text, make it easy to scan so that people are less likely to sort of wander their eyes by and then decide it was too long and didn't read. It's quite hard to manufacture, but if you can develop an engaging writing style, that's also a bonus. Conversational styles work well on a blog. These are not substitutes for academic papers. This is a way to engage with an audience with, you don't want to have sort of overly formal language in there or too much jargon. I've seen blogs that have incorporated different aspects of storytelling, different anecdotes, anything that makes the content relatable and memorable is good. You can pose questions, you can, the blog does have the facility, depending on where you're posting it, to have a kind of slight interaction element. So you might want to prompt for comments so that you can engage and interact with your readers. And then there's the visual appeal. If you're able to introduce sort of multimedia elements, good visuals, you can put different charts, video clips. There's lots of different ways to add variety and interest to a blog post so that you're going to make the content look a little bit sort of visually more appealing. I'm from a library's point of view, I'm on an editorial group that manages a blog site that is for the Northern Health Libraries community. So we aim to get anyone that's been on an interesting conference, an event, has done a case study, done anything that's riveting in library land, we encourage people to write for that. And we were very light touch in terms of editorial. So if you do find a sort of subject specific webpage that you're submitting to, and then there were maybe author guidelines to follow, as Parveen's mentioned. They are extremely helpful when you're writing a specific type of journal article, but it may well be that a blog has some author guidelines too in terms of length. We recommend somewhere around the 700 word mark for a reasonably length entry, but we also take short 300 or 400 word entries as well. That just stops people dozing off when they're reading your page, and they can engage with the content a little more if it's not too overwhelming in length. So that's very quickly cantering across what you might want to consider when you're writing a blog entry. It isn't a substitute for writing a journal article, but blogging about your research is a particularly good way to get your messages out there. It sort of helps with the dissemination of research. So publishing in a journal is obviously really massive in terms of reach, but that isn't the only way that you can get your messages out there. So particularly if you can make things link, so if you tweet about your blog, then that's going to gain more traction and you can drive audiences towards where you've written. So you can engage with several different forms of publishing to get your messages out there. I think that's just about it, Parveen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so while you talk about your ideal readers, as you think about your audience who is going to have an input or have an interest into what you have written, and that helps you write it better, you also would have other people who probably are non-ideal readers. These could be people who don't belong to your target group, but they find your writing useful. So you also have to think about them as to what is it. There should be something for those people who may not be an ideal reader, but would like to come and kind of see a few things in there to be able to understand. So they may find your writing useful, they belong to your target group, and they find your material useless. So there are people who are interested, or interested in the topic that you are writing, or the area that you're interested in, but they think what you write is rubbish. And they come and have a look at, they still would like to read to basically to see if you have said anything useful or if it's completely rubbish. And I think what they would, one of the things which this group would learn is how to not do things that, for themselves, or how to do things better for themselves. And the third section is usually people who don't belong to your group and they find your material completely useless, so they're never going to engage. So the last one is never going to have a look at your information. So I don't think that's really a problematic. But even in this group, you also have to think, is there any message that you want to give to any of these people? And therefore, what is it that you're writing? What is it that you're saying to somebody that is going to be useful for different types of audience as you go. So we have talked about overall sort of strategy and who your audience are, but remember, writing is not, you're not going to be able to just sit down and write something and have it as a final product. It's very, very rarely that people are able to do it. Please challenge me if there's anyone who can just write something as a first draft, and that's excellent, and they don't have to go back to it. We find it really difficult to get it across to students, to authors in different capacities that I work with, that first draft, perhaps it may be possible that your final draft or your final submission may not look at all like what you've written at first. But first draft is really very, very important, because if you haven't put your pen on the paper and if you haven't started drafting the first draft, you're never going to be have the final draft ever. So therefore, it is important, but that's not the final thing. And what takes more time for people is to spending time on that first draft, to take it to kind of, to have different iterations, to make sure it's improved regularly, to make sure that, it's readable properly. And I always suggest that write something and make sure that you go back to it, take a break, go back to it after a few days, then you can see things even in your own writing that you probably don't agree with, and you need to improve, and you need to enhance. And doing it 2-3 times would really help in terms of improving the quality of what you have written and who you have written for. Over time, you do develop skills to do this slightly quickly, but there are no shortcuts to it. And this is, we've talked about an overview. There is a lot of other skills which, as a writer, we have to develop, which help in terms of writing, which includes how to look for evidence, what evidence is reliable, how do we choose the right kind of evidence, and how do we integrate that. If you're a student, if you're an academic, you also want to look at software management system, the reference management system, which one is better, how do you navigate all those aspects are appropriate, what is the hierarchy of evidence, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and how do you make different things appropriate. If English is not your first language, then it is also about, and you're writing in English, then it is about accuracy of the language and what messages you're taking across. So there is a whole host of things that you have to constantly and continuously learn and improve your writing. And all of that, those aspects and working on those aspects help directly and indirectly. And most of this is a very unconscious and subconscious process. So there is a lot that needs doing when it comes to writing, thinking about your audience, thinking about who you're writing it for, why you're writing it, and what message you want to take them away is really, really important. So thank you. That is the end of the presentation, but let's have a discussion and let's have a see if you found this useful and if there are any questions that you would like me to add in. Andy, would you like to have say something around anything which I've not mentioned, which you, from your perspective of doing these sorts of workshops and talking to people about various aspects and doing work yourself, which you would suggest?
I suppose one of the tips would be, so when you speak to people who are doing research, you don't feel comfortable writing this way or trying to get writing. It's that confidence thing, getting those first few words down. And I think sometimes it's almost like have a conversation with someone. And that conversation almost is like the draft of the work, literally having that dialogue with somebody, even if you feel confident enough putting your phone down and recording it, because you'll suddenly find yourself feeling like, oh my goodness, where's all this stuff coming out of my head? Because there's like a block when you try and write sometimes, but if you say it, it comes out and you suddenly start thinking, oh, I know all this stuff that I didn't think I knew, or I've got all these ideas. And sometimes that can help force things, I think.
Definitely, I think so. As someone for whom English was third or fourth language, who literally had to think through one thing and write. One of the things which I used to struggle in my initial years that, sometimes you don't get the word that you want to write. And even now, many people ask this question that I don't know where to start. And when I'm sometimes very blunt, I just say start with second sentence, just write ... for the first one and start from the second sentence. If you can't write first sentence, write in the language that you know. If there's a word which comes to you in another language, just write that word and then carry on writing, because you've written that for the very first time. When you go back, you will improve it. Write how you're speaking to somebody. So if you're able to explain it, as Andy's saying, that if you're able to explain something to somebody, just write that down. The written language is slightly different, but you can always do that later on. But to get you from stage A to stage B, where you've written something, what's in your mind, taking it on the paper is really very important. Another thing which I have picked up from students, from colleagues, from authors, is that we, and I think as academics, I would say I've done that myself quite a lot as well, that when you want to write something, you tend to read a lot. You want to read as much as possible, because maybe there is somebody else who have said it better. And you go through scrolling the webs and papers and read through things and, trying to find an inspiration or trying to find the right kind of way so that you can write better. It helps having the background knowledge. It helps understanding what people have written, how language is being used, but it's not a short fix. It's not going to help you write. The right way of writing is writing. Unless you put your paper on the pen, put your pen on the paper, there's no other way of doing it. So you can read and read and read. Unless you start writing, the paper is not going to write itself. Okay, so any questions? Any specific questions that people have? Anything specific to your idea that you wanted to write about, and if that's been covered or not covered, or any other aspects that you want to explore, let's just have that discussion.
We had a question come up in chat, Parveen, earlier on.
Yeah,
it was when you mentioned case studies and case reports being fairly low down on the kind of hierarchy of evidence. There's a question about how different types of writing can be categorized. I wondered whether that's just talking about the sort of evidence pyramid, and whether we need to just flesh that out a little bit.
Yes, I'm trying to think of how all of you here are healthcare professionals, or all of you are kind of, perhaps writing it for academic purposes and for other things. So one of the things which we use in healthcare, medicine, nursing, public health is hierarchy of evidence chart. And what it does is it tells you a little bit about which type of study or which type of things come at which stage, and what is how do you determine the quality of evidence, what is the lower level of evidence, and what is the higher level of evidence, and different aspects around that. So you may have seen this.
I've got one. Have you got one?
Yes, I've just picked up one on the website just to yeah, if are you sharing something?
I was going I'm not sure quite what I'm sharing, to be fair. Hang on, I've got one I prepared earlier if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that one again. Sorry about that. Hopefully.
Here it is.
Grand. I was trying to make that a little larger. There we go. So yeah, I've just snatched this up one of my older PowerPoints. So the idea is that a piece of evidence's ability to guide clinical action, that's right, what Parveen was saying, in a healthcare setting, is increased if you're nearer the top of the pyramid rather than the bottom. But the topics get more specific as you go down. So case studies and case reports are pretty low down because they're highly specific. But when they get built on, or those sort of issues are incorporated into research that is of a higher quality, then they're more likely to influence healthcare. That's the idea of the evidence pyramid.
Okay, and if you look at it from the very, it starts from the very bottom to above, and there was a time when it used to start at case series and case studies, but it has gone kind of, further back. So at the bottom of the evidence, you've got background information, expert opinion, non-EBM guidelines, so non-evidence-based medicine. Sometimes EBM is also, you would find words like EBN, so evidence-based nursing, or evidence-based healthcare, things like that, all basically mean the same thing according to, but are related to different professions. So where people have provided information based on their expertise or have written things about various different things, that's usually or background information that is about a one particular topic or issue, that usually comes very low at the bottom level. Then you have got individual case reports that we were talking about. So individual case reports, again, the terminology you will find is used differently. Sometimes they're also used as case studies, but case reports actually means what I've said earlier on, one description of a condition or of a situation of one particular person, usually used in medicine, and therefore just describes an interesting case or interesting management of a case, etc. So they are at this, but having said that, none of them is useless, because it helps develop to the second stage. It helps people think through this. So it's not that these are useless. It is what you're using at what time and what is available. Okay, so if, for example, there was nothing available at all on any of these as on a one particular topic, and only background information or expert opinion is available, that is valuable. So if we look at the initiation of COVID infection, when that happened, there was nothing at all available. And we saw that guidelines and things changed as the disease progressed, and we still don't know enough about it because it's only been 3 years that we are exposed to COVID, and the information would still build up. So at that time, experts talking about what needs to be done was very relevant, and that was the gold standard. But then we have individual case reports where individual studies about how it has affected somebody and what has happened to them. And then case series where it's more than one person, so it's reported on the same issues, but more than one person. So for example, with regards to COVID, if there were studies on like people who have lost taste, and if it was based on one person's thing, it was case report. If it's based on more than one person, 10 people, 12 people, something like that, then it's case series, studies. And the next level is cohort studies, which talk about a particular cohort who has experienced particular type of infection or condition or situation, and you're following through for a longer period of time and then understanding the evidence. Because it's an observational study, what you do is you observe those people over time, you get some information and come back to it. There's no experiment involved or anything else involved. So that comes there. The next one you have is non-randomized controlled trials, where randomization hasn't occurred. And again, if these are experimental, but may and slightly higher up from observation, but may or may not be have the complete criteria for randomized controlled trials. Then you have got randomized controlled trials. Again, these are on individual subjects or topics or practices or medicine, which are being tested through these. And then the other one is critically appraised literature that comes on top of this, because up until now, what we've looked at previously was based on research by one person, etc. But literature reviews and critically appraised literature would be various different studies which have happened at various different settings in the world, and bringing them together and using them to critically look up on the strengths and weaknesses of those literature to then try and find what's useful and what's not, comes in there. And then comes systematic review, which is a better version of literature reviews again, and then meta-analysis, which involves statistical analysis and other aspects, which is at the top of the hierarchy of evidence. So knowing this hierarchy of evidence helps you understand what evidence to use, where to use it from, and how to do it. So if you were a student, for example, please don't use websites as part of your evidence. The websites, government websites, things, NICE guidelines, some of those things are really important. They would come under hierarchy of evidence, but somebody like I've written a blog on a disease that I'm interested in, using that as a reference may not please your your academic supervisors and other people, that's not the right kind of evidence that you're using. But again, it depends. It goes back to the fact that who are you writing it for? If you were writing a blog, if you were writing it for usual formal audience, you may not need a reference, or you may be able to reference a report or a blog or any other information which is provided somewhere else. But if you use that blog or something for your PhD proposal, I guarantee you that you're not going to get to the stage 2, because you're not providing the right kind of evidence to the supervisors that you have got the knowledge of appropriate evidence that needs to be used in proposal writing. So I guess the idea here is to not only think through your audience, but at the same time build your knowledge about other aspects as you go through. Okay, thank you, Sarah, for sharing this. Yeah, so any questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Dr. Praveen, I want to ask, I don't know, is it relevant to the, to the session or not, but can we use ChatGPT for the blog writing, as it is not, as you mentioned, we don't have to write references or evidences in our blogging. For example, if we are writing for newspapers, so can we use the ChatGPT for this
What
purpose?
do you think?
I think we can't, but we can get some ideas from ChatGPT. That's my perception.
Okay, ChatGPT is in, and there have been many discussions. I'm only actually read a small little article earlier on today. So there was a big hoo-ha about ChatGPT 2 months back, and people were there were articles and in journal articles and other things where people were really, really concerned about ChatGPT and if it's going to write for everything. ChatGPT is a tool, and a tool should only be used as a tool. So when it comes to human writing or getting the message across, again, it goes back to the fact that why are you writing? If you are just writing for the sake of kind of, writing it, or do you want to develop your reputation in a particular field and want to talk about something, which means that you have to share your ideas and your information as to what is important. ChatGPT is not going to be able to do that for you. ChatGPT at most may be able to summarize evidence for you. We have had colleagues who regularly look at ChatGPT. It sometimes mixes up people. It gives wrong information. And if you just take things as these are presented and you've pasted it somewhere and you think it's all done, I don't think that's going to work. I wouldn't discount ChatGPT completely, because I think when, for example, you are in writer's block and you wanted to start off somewhere and you wanted to get some tips or something like that, it may give you some hinters, but I am coming from the camp where I think it cannot write the whole thing for you. I would like to ask Andy about, I know Andy and Andrew Booth and others constantly have those conversations. So Andy, what are your thoughts about ChatGPT and the question here?
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting because I'm giving a talk at the end of the month for an AGM on AI and communicating research, something I'm thinking a little bit about, which obviously we haven't got much time for these additional things. But one thing that I've tried with it was I thought it'd be interesting to look at whether it could lay summaries of research, because that, again, that's a problem that academics have in terms of skills and time being a massive one. And I've been involved in various press releases that seem to go through loads of iterations and a load of time go into it. And so I took one of Alicia's papers. So you'll know Alicia, won't you, Praveen? So I took one of Alicia Cathane's papers, and I just put the introduction in, just the abstract, the introduction, the conclusion, because a lot of the stuff in the middle, I thought, I don't know how well it's going to be able to digest this and do anything useful with. And I said, write me a 300-word press release for, sort of for a lay audience. And it wrote me something that wasn't bad, it was really very dry and a bit dull, but it was fine. So I then asked it, I said, okay, can you write me the same thing for 250 words, but aimed at a 14-year-old, which is the average sort of newspaper level. So it sent me something back. The title was spot on. The text was pretty good. It was formatted well. It formats as a press release, so you can put all the details in the little prompts. And I sent it to Alicia, and she said it was like really good. Said it was like pretty good, and I thought it was interesting. So I tried it again with a couple of others, and it did the thing which you may have heard of, some of you, hallucinate, and it made up a quote, which so it said the researcher said. Now I couldn't find word for word text in the paper. I presume it was probably like not fact. It was probably factually correct, but there's no way in the Cannell's chance you're going to want to use that, because in case it gets wrong. And it goes back to the issue that, yeah, it's got great potential in terms of time saving, but you still need a couple of people to really read through it and check it's right. And also what is lacking is the human quotes, which would really enhance it. So potential, but then it depends on the discipline. If you're taking something highly technical, something like a science paper or mathematics paper, engineering or a technical medical paper, it's probably going to do a half decent job at best. But I think there's potential there, definitely potential.
Exactly. And I will take the example of, for instance, if you're writing a research article or if you're writing a student assignment. So, you know, many of colleagues were talking about ChatGPT and if it's going to be used and if that's going to cause chaos, and you know, how do we actually check if the work is done by the person, if the work is done by ChatGPT and everything else. It is going to be a problem if you are asking people to provide or to summarize already available information or to say something about an already available practice. But I know, I know, Ayaz, you're a nurse, Caroline is there, Lindsay. I mean, most of us are nurses or healthcare professionals. So you see, assignments that you do within the healthcare field are not just regurgitation of the information. The assignments that you do would like you to pick up a piece or pick up a practice and think of how it is happening in practice, what is actually happening, what does the evidence say, have the ability, have your input as reflection as to what are your thoughts about it, and suggest what's going to happen thinking about your practice setting. ChatGPT cannot do that for you because it doesn't know. It may regurgitate some information, and if you've decided to kind of put that in, it may not make sense to the reader at all in that sense. But yes, it is a tool, and we should know how to use the tool effectively for its. But as of now, I don't think it can replace humans or human writing. Does that answer your question, Ayaz?
Yeah, partially it has, you have answered me, but still I have some confusion, like can we use it for the, you know, newspaper blogs? My question was only that. I know like it has some pros and cons, and it cannot replace the human brain, but only I just wanted, if we paraphrase, you know, whatever they give us contents, and we paraphrase that and we put some our own thoughts in that content, and then we send it to the newspaper. So would it be fine? And that was, you know, my question. So, but
you've said it yourself. So you use this for initial kind of thinking and then add your thoughts. If you use that for initial starting off and giving you some ideas and think through it, read through it, add your thoughts, make sure it's factually correct, then yes, it can be used. But if you use it to ask ChatGPT to write a blog on XYZ and send it as it is for publication, it may not work. Okay, any other questions? Caroline, do you have any questions? Does that help you in some ways, especially with regards to writing assignments, or, you know, why you came here up to this session, or do you have any questions that we could address?
No, I've not got any questions. I'm happy with what I've heard.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I think that was really useful. And please do give us some feedback, and please do let us know any comments that you have, or anything else that you would like to add, or any topics that you would like to for us to discuss. And indeed would be good to have your feedback as well. And we do this for DBTH and STH and other audiences. And I know you do quite a lot of relevant stuff as well, and we'll be happy to, share those information to potential people within the trust, if that helps us too. Great. So if there is no question at all, Sarah, do you have anything else to add?
Not very much, apart from my usual offer to anyone who's at DBTH and is interested in any support that the library can give, whether it's searching for assignments, for research, for anything evidency at all. Don't be shy and get in touch with me, and I will do my best to help.
Yeah, and if you're doing some work in terms of writing a report or anything else like that, we do writing for publication session. We also do ideas clinic, where you can come and discuss the idea for your dissertation assignment or anything else that you're doing to take that to the next stage, or research or audit or evaluation, anything else like that. Please do email, and we will try and help as much as possible. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and have a very good day.
Thanks, Bobby. Bye.
Yes.